Welcome back everybody, it's Paul Maglev here with Train Mallet 2. Having completed the telescope pretty quickly in the previous episode, we're making another trip back to America to do more industrial shenanigans. Only this time, with the help of the DC Hyperloop. Before I go into detail about this level, let me preface it by apologizing for not getting a video up last weekend as planned. You likely noticed 2 videos came up this weekend instead of 1, and the reasons for that are twofold. The first is to make up for last week's mistake. The second is because the show must go on, and I cannot fathom a world where I postpone content and can't wrap up this series before Christmas. I admit prefacing my apology in this video is suboptimal, because this is the second video coming out this weekend instead of the first, but I spent enough time on that fast telescope video, and I want to move on. Now, let's get back to that level at hand. If you thought the bottlenecks from the previous level were a convoluted mess, wait until you see what this level has to offer. It's not only designed to make several stations as painfully far away as possible, but its Hyperloop tunnels are not as effective as expected. Granted, they don't work like they would with the actual Hyperloop as shown in existing concepts or the most recent prototypes. Instead, they basically function like a delayed warp pipe in a level for Super Mario Bros. It's a good idea to leave some distance in between the trains that enter the Hyperloop, because if a second train enters while the first train is currently passing through or exiting the other side, the game will reject it and make the second train reverse course and turn around. The key issue with the Hyperloop tunnels in this level is that electricity from the grid cannot pass through them for some reason, which means for the first time in game, electricity must be generated in 2 power plants, one fired by coal in the high plateau on the left, and another powered by water along the river. In my strategy for earning all 5 stars, I start off the level with connections that require the least amount of construction. This includes hooking up the station in the bottom right to the adjacent oil field, the station in DC to the adjacent Hyperloop tunnel, and the other Hyperloop tunnel to the port receiving natural latex. Next, I connect another Hyperloop tunnel portal to a town at the bottom, the processed rubber factory, and the coal mine at the top of the map. All this requires a unique track configuration shown here, to accommodate rail traffic in all directions. While dispatched trains are on their way, some extra connections are made to the hydroelectric power station, the plane factory, the coal-fired power station, the other Hyperloop tunnel to the station in DC, and the port supplying steel plates. While all of this infrastructure gets built, the first priority when dispatching trains is to focus on importing natural latex, which requires a steady stream of workers and coal to their respective stations. Dispatching workers to extract oil at the bottom of the map is also necessary to maintain a steady flow of easy revenue. This wraps up the first phase of my strategy. The second phase of the strategy requires a few more infrastructure changes and more dispatching. This included connecting the oil refinery, the port supplying engineers, a second connection to the port supplying steel plates, and the port supplying wood. This is topped off, ironically enough, with a tunnel in the center of the map underneath the central Hyperloop as an extra shortcut. In the game footage, however, I flummoxed the level by building the tunnel prematurely without extra funds to connect it anywhere, taking up valuable time. My hope is that by showing this mistake, you learn from it and avoid repeating it yourself. The remainder of this phase heavily focuses on dispatching, with priority focusing on the distribution of steel plates and processed rubber. This processed rubber initially goes towards completing a level objective, and the rest goes toward car manufacturing. The final phase of gameplay focuses on the production of planes, fuel, and automobiles. I do not have much advice on the matter, just avoid mistakes at all costs to save time, because they will add up. Now, here are some final thoughts on the level. There are several time sinks in this level that slow the pace of gameplay, serving as challenges to getting all 5 stars. The most intensive include the production of planes, fuel, and cars, which are all compounded by the fact that the components which make them take time to extract and/or process. The most annoying time sink, though, is the challenge behind the 4th star, which demands players to never upgrade locomotives. This dramatically shapes the pace of the level not only because they are so slow in comparison to next-generation locomotives, but also because the level demands 14 rail cars worth of planes, fuel, and automobiles, when the locomotives can only carry 6 rail cars at most. That completes all the thoughts and advice I have for this level. Let's move on to weekly updates. The first week of December had quite a few changes. but many of them I refuse to share because they're too personal. So there will be less to discuss than I hoped for. What I can mention, however, certainly stood out. Starting with recording, I managed to reduce the amount of time it takes to get decent voiceovers because I used gum. This keeps my mouth moist enough to ward off the dreadful lip smacking and mouth clicking sounds I complained about in the past. This saves time because less of it is spent doing multiple takes on the same parts of my script. Now all I have to do is find a more natural variety of gum that avoids all the hassle associated with artificial colors or sweeteners. Should I fail, viable alternatives to gum include mints or hard candies with similar attributes. When I was not occupied trying to churn out a video on the weekend or catching legendary Pokemon as a distraction, I somehow managed to forget about the autumn sale at the Steam store, and will have to wait until the winter sale in a few weeks from now to get certain games at a decent discount. That, of course, assumes 1. All the games in question were on sale, and 2. They were only worth buying online for my PC instead of getting their more expensive physical counterparts on consoles. Although I prefer hard copies of games, especially games about certain franchises or console exclusives, I am more impartial to digital copies when it comes to other games made available on PC. I say this knowing I took a much harder line in the previous episode, so I thought I should clarify that here since the last thing I want to do right now is re-edit the last episode's voiceover. What surprised me during the whole of Cyber Week, though, was that there were far more hard copy versions of indie games than I initially expected on retail shelves this year. But I'm going off on a tangent. The other matter at hand was getting a Christmas tree. For the last few years, our household has a tradition of getting small trees we stick in the living room. Not that our living room lives up to its namesake to begin with. We do this because the family is getting too old and impatient to deal with setting up, decorating, dismantling, then cleaning up the pine needles associated with a regular-sized Christmas tree standing 6 feet tall. We also do this because Mom and I refuse to set up the disgusting artificial Christmas tree collecting dust in the garage. That monstrosity is riddled with photodegraded artificial needles and an endless supply of plastic flash resembling human hair. It's disgusting. The trees we like to pick usually stand 3 feet tall and rest atop the coffee table on a lid of a plastic storage tub for collecting spilt water. This year, though, we learned from our mistakes the previous year and made adjustments. We got a tree at the beginning of the month, for example, instead of at the last minute when there were almost no trees left. Mom and I also made sure the plastic base the tree was forced into was free of cracks to avoid leaking water. This ensured we avoided last year's fiasco, which required us to replace the original base with an improvised tree base using green crafting foam held in place with rocks in a plastic tray. Most importantly of all for me, though, I remembered to bring some gloves to carry the small tree around to avoid covering my hands in tree resin. The outcome from my perspective was a success, because many of the problems experienced last year were completely avoided. The only problem this year was finding a decent place to put the tree, since a new television set and futon occupy the best places to have a tree. Now for something completely different. I usually don't talk about work, but there are a few ideas I felt mentioning. This month I thought of adding more work hours to receive certain benefits. I currently don't sign up for more than 4 shifts a week, so changing that will change the nature of my routine. If I work 90 hours in a month, I am authorized to choose my shifts 2 weeks in advance, instead of only 3 days in advance. This means I would avoid competing against my colleagues to get my current, unpredictable work schedule in favor of a more regimented, predictable schedule that is planned further ahead on the calendar, optimizing my work-life balance. I have no idea how I will balance that alongside videos this month, but it's just a thought. The last update is the onslaught of circular saw activity next door, because my neighbor has been remodeling their floor with tile. I finally got used to it, but the first few days were a nightmare. I was not sure where to mention this in the video. I only thought I should mention that in case I forget. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video, and until then, take care, stay awesome, stay true to yourself, and remember to never give up. Bye everybody!